Alright, the top story we're going to be talking about today is most likely going to be the Mosquito Fire right here. And in particular, all that activity you see on the western side where we had that hot spot yesterday. Really going to be interested to see how far that hot spot moved north last night, the exact fire perimeter. We'll be able to check that out on the Google Earth, see how close it got to Forest Hill right there. And then we're also going to check out all sorts of other stuff like the recent numbers on this fire, the wildfire forecast to try to predict what this fire is going to be doing in the future. And then something new today, I even have the Wharf S Fire model where we're going to be able to see where one of the top wildfire models in the world is predicting this fire will move over the next 2 days. But with all that being said, welcome back to Wildfire Insider. This is kind of a new format that I've been trying where every morning by myself I usually just look up the wildfire situation in California for about 30 minutes to an hour, just kind of trying to figure out what I can expect throughout the day. And then I figured, I might as well just do this analysis live. And it turns out it's actually even more helpful because I keep an eye on the live chat during these videos. So if you guys post comments or questions, it actually helps to make these videos better, and it helps me understand what people are interested in hearing about more. And then it also, you guys are sometimes able to say some comments where it's things that I didn't know. So it overall just increases all of our knowledge of what's going on with wildfire in California. But for those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Holt Hanley. I'm a broadcast meteorologist at KSBW. And then I also am a wildfire researcher for San Jose State. And clearly I make these wildfire videos on YouTube. Now with all those introductions done, let's just check out the Mosquito Fire here. Does look like we increased last night. That's at 61,012 acres. I believe when I posted last night, we were at 58,000. So it looks like we did get either some growth overnight or they were able to just collect some new data on the fire, and then they were able to figure out a better picture of how much growth we had yesterday. That's the more likely version than if we had like 3,000 more acres overnight. I'd imagine they just reflew the fire, got some new data, and figured out exactly how much it had grown. So I did get that data that shows our growth from yesterday. So I'll turn it on right here. And you can clearly see most of our growth was towards the northeast and then this eastern section right there. That right there is a pocket that most likely hasn't seen any fire history recently. That's one of the spots that we've been talking about that most likely would have a lot of growth, because when we look at fire history, really nothing there in any recent time. So what that means is there's just going to be a lot of fuels in here that haven't burned in a really long time. Same story on this western side as well. And that western side is actually the spot we should focus on first, because that was the big story yesterday. So zooming in here, what ended up happening? It'll be useful to see the topography on this. So let's zoom in a little bit. And then I'll turn off our most recent data. So this is what it looked like yesterday morning when we were looking at the Mosquito Fire. Down here you can see the Middle Fork American River. And you notice how it kind of meanders in here. And then there's also some very steep terrain. So what CAL FIRE was saying in their evening report last night was what ends up happening on this river is winds will be funneled through this canyon. And then because it kind of meanders like this, you'll get these little eddies where the winds kind of swirl and, swirl I'd say is a good word for it. And they said what ended up happening yesterday was they got some of those swirling winds. It picked up a burning ember on this side, maybe one of those little red circles that we're seeing right there that represent the isolated fires. Picked up one of those embers, tossed it over the Middle Fork American River, and then you can see that it's all uphill right here. During the day, I'd imagine we also get some, kind of looks like a little canyon right there, so we probably get some up canyon winds. And that would make sense because we just saw this spot fire just take off, and up on top of this hill is Forest Hill. So clicking in here, you can see Forest Hill High School. And when we look at the recent data, at least as of last night, it hadn't gone north of Forest Hill Road. So now, again, that's what it looked like yesterday with that new spot fire. That's how much we grew in this section. I actually have to zoom out a little bit because it grew more. So that's how much we grew yesterday because of that big spot fire. And then that also just looks like that section continued to grow right there. So let's actually zoom in here and see how close we got. So it looks like we have Forest Hill Transfer Station. Looks like the fire came right up towards there, but didn't actually go in there. And then we have Tahoe National Forest, American Forest Hill Divide School. Doesn't look like the fire reached up there. Then I think this is probably going to be Forest Hill High School. Looks like it pushed right up towards Forest Hill Road, but then did not cross Forest Hill Road. And again, this is just as of the most recent data that we have to work with. I'll make it big. So this is the most recent data that we have to work with. Now, what I did see, I was working at KSBW last night, and we had some reports from KCRA that we were showing, and I did see some footage of a lot of cars and other types of vehicles burning, and I believe it is this kind of, I don't know what this is, maybe just like a large parking lot or some kind of place where you can leave vehicles. I did see a lot of footage of vehicles burning, so it does look like the fire kind of pushed into that little, I don't know what to call that, I'll just call it a parking lot, and then it took out some of those vehicles. But at least the good news, as of right now, based on the information we have, doesn't look like it's crossed over Forest Hill Road yet, which is great news because you can see that's where Forest Hill High School is. And same story over on this side as well. So zooming out so we can get a little perspective, then zooming back in. Here's Forest Hill. We have lots of structures in here, but it doesn't look like it really pushed into any of these structures yet. Looks like down here is a lot of fuel. And then we do have some structures on this hill right here. Now, something I will say is I can't really confirm whether those structures were destroyed or not, because you can sometimes get a perimeter that stretches all the way up here. But then it doesn't mean every single thing within that perimeter burned. So I can't really confirm if those structures that we do see on this hill burned or not. I certainly hope that they did not. So overall, let's just turn that on and off again so we can get another idea of that growth. On and off. So yeah, a lot of growth yesterday. That was the big story. But as of right now, looks like they almost kind of pulled off a miracle here and were able to stop that before it just completely rushed through Forest Hill. Before I forget, we can actually look at why they might have been so successful in stopping it, because this is something that we've talked a lot about in previous videos. If we look at the maps, oh, this is from 2 hours ago. So this is going to be a very recent map for the Mosquito Fire. These maps always take super long to load. So in the meantime, we can also just zoom out here and look at that eastern section of the fire. So all over here, there's two main things that I noticed. One, most of our growth on this fire yesterday was on this eastern section. Again, not a big surprise, because when we look at this map, not a lot of fire history in there. And then we had southwesterly winds. So this is the area that we were expecting the most growth yesterday. Now, if we come back here, here's something that I maybe wasn't expecting. And that's that it looks like they did just a massive firing operation, I believe last night. I hadn't seen anything about this yesterday. So it seems like they did it last night. And I can't believe how much they were able to do right here. So kind of the purpose of this, I believe wildland firefighters and personnel call it a catcher's mitt, where we have all this growth in here, and some of that being some recent growth, which you see with that kind of reddish color. And what they don't want to happen is for it to jump over here and then take off into this wilderness. So what they do is they actually put fire on the ground in here, clear out a bunch of these fuels, and then by the time this fire gets into this area, there's no more fuels to burn, so it almost just catches it and stops the fire in its tracks, or at least hopefully it stops the fire in the tracks. Sometimes you can get burning embers that jump over a firing operation and then take off. That's something we saw in the Dixie fire last year. But just unbelievable how much work they were able to get done on that side, what I believe was last night. So now let's see if they've included that in this. So it looks like, yeah, that must have been a very recent burn because it's not showing up on this map that was uploaded 2 hours ago. Now that doesn't mean that that firing operation happened within the last 2 hours. It just means that it's so recent that it wasn't put into this map whenever they actually produced this one. But this one is always great to look at for containment. So let's actually get an idea of containment. Looks like it's 20%. So yesterday morning when I did this update, I believe, I like the live chat right now. Your videos are lit. And then somebody says, ha, lit, appropriate adjective. Gotta love a good fire pun. Gotta keep a good sense of humor during fire season, right? So yesterday morning when I did one of these videos, I believe our containment was 18%. Last night, my last tweet that I did, it looks like we were at 25%. But then if we look at watch duty right now, it looks like it's at 20%. So again, that doesn't necessarily mean that some of that might be because the fire grew. So then if your containment stays the same, and then the fire grows, less of the percentage of your perimeter is contained. But it can also just be due to kind of better mapping and that kind of stuff, so getting a more accurate picture. But 20%, that's still up from yesterday, and considering how much activity that we had on the Mosquito Fire yesterday, I'd actually say that's good news right there. And then if we want to see where that containment is, it's going to be this black line. So it looks like we have a lot. Looks like they tied in more of this southern and kind of western section of the fire. And especially around, can't tell, around Volcanoville, looks like towards the northeast of Volcanoville, that has officially turned into black line, which is considered contained. Just north of Volcanoville, it almost looks black, but it's actually just completed dozer lines where they've completed so many that it looks like it's almost contained at that point. Now here is where we get the best information we can find for why that hotspot or the spot fire yesterday didn't just go completely into Forest Hill as we were looking at on here, and it seems to have stopped right before Forestville High School and before a lot of these structures in here. Now the reason for that, if you look in very closely, you can see a lot of these black kind of cross lines, and that's where they had a whole bunch of completed dozer lines. It almost seems like they saw this coming and prepared over the last 3 days when we had minimal fire activity for an event like this. So just unbelievable work done by all our personnel on this fire. Now it also looks like we have a completed dozer line down here. So what they're going to try to do on that side, and that was actually something I was kind of worried about this morning, is when we look at this map in here. So this section right here hasn't burned. That was the new growth from yesterday. My concern is that it was just going to kind of like keep taking off right there, but it does look like where we have that little pocket right there, they do have a completed dozer line right there. So hopefully that's able to just stop the fire in its tracks right there, and we don't get any more spot fires jumping over that. But then if we do get a spot fire jumping over that, looks like we have even more completed dozer lines way back here. So they've been putting in a lot of good work just preparing for anything that could happen around this side of the fire. And the reason they've been putting in so much work over there, one, this map actually paints kind of the picture, is we don't have a lot of fire history there. So that means there's a lot of fuels in this area that haven't burned in a really long time. So if the fire gets there, it has the possibility of just taking off. And there's just a lot of fuel for it to grow. But I think this is actually more of the reason why they've been putting in so much work on this western side, is when we look at structures, there are thousands of structures all around this western side, and especially around where we got that spot fire yesterday. So good to see we do have some more completed dozer lines that will help to protect these structures if this spot fire ends up taking off again. Now, something that just popped into my mind that we haven't done yet, that probably should have been the first thing that we did today. Click on this camera right here. This is Bald Mountain Eldorado 2. Let's check out 3-hour time lapse, because this at least was the camera that was showing that spot fire yesterday. Notice, looks like the fire is going the opposite, or the smoke's going the opposite direction throughout the morning hours. That actually makes sense. Usually your winds shift which direction they're going, whether it's overnight or in the afternoon. Overnight, they usually go down canyon. Afternoon, they usually go up canyon. Now, it does look like we're still getting a decent amount of smoke off of this. So it looks like this spot fire did remain active overnight. Sometimes we can't tell if that's just because they're maybe doing firing operations on the ground, trying to burn out some of the fuels when we had those favorable conditions. We did have a lot of moisture move in overnight. So that was one thing that did help us on the Mosquito Fire, was our relative humidity increased to over 70%. So that helps calm the fire down, but it does look like we still have some activity right there. Now, I want to check out the other camera, because this one, anybody who didn't see this camera yesterday should go back. Actually, I could just show it right now. While that's loading, we can look at what this side looked like yesterday. I'll make it big, make sure the sound's off. So this is what this camera looked like yesterday. It almost looks like we have lenticular clouds around the smoke plume right here, and then we got almost 3 different heads of this plume where we were seeing a lot of activity on this side. So going to be interesting to see what it looks like as of right now. So we do have some smoke being produced. I would say a little bit more smoke than we had yesterday, which kind of makes sense because we had more activity yesterday. So then there's likely more activity overnight. But as of right now, not one of those giant smoke plumes, which is what you'd expect for the morning. But the fact that we have this much smoke being produced throughout the morning does kind of tell me that we're going to have an active afternoon. Something else we can do here is, we'll change this to 48. See how much smoke is coming off from the satellite imagery? Let's just zoom way in here so we can see it a little better. So it looks like that eastern side, when it switches to that overnight camera, where you see that black kind of color, that's where we're seeing some activity on the fire. So it does look like the spot fire is still active over there, but most of the burning that happened overnight does look to be on that eastern side. And then there is some smoke being produced right now. And again, I'd say more smoke being produced than what we had yesterday. Now, the other big thing that I notice on this satellite imagery is much clearer skies than previous days. And if you're new to the live chat and you haven't heard anything else I've been saying, that actually explains why the fire was so active yesterday. We had all that moisture from Hurricane K, which is kind of the remnants of it are now just kind of clouds off of the coast of Mexico. A lot of that moisture was keeping us nice and calm for about 3 days because it was just keeping our temperatures down, keeping our winds down over the fire. We had a big smoke layer over the Mosquito Fire, and we had just some great conditions for about 3 days there. But then all that moisture, you can see, has moved off into places like Utah and Colorado and Wyoming at this point, and California is left with the clear skies. Now, those clear skies yesterday just allowed the fire to rapidly increase in activity, where we were diminished the previous days because of all that cloud cover. Yesterday, we saw the inversion lift a lot earlier, and then our winds increase, and that really just led to a lot of active growth on it. So, next thing to do that we haven't done, so we've looked at 61,012 acres. I think that just got updated again. 20% containment, and then we have evacuation orders and warnings in place. I don't usually go over those in these videos, but if you are curious, I put the link to InSiWeb in the description of this video, And then you can click on those two links right there, which take you to something that looks like that. So that's always a good thing to stay updated on if you live around this fire. So trying to keep an eye on live chat. Oh yeah, somebody said Cedar Creek is still 0%. Yeah, we'll check out Cedar Creek at some point in this video. I'll probably also look at the Dutch fire at some point in this video just to see what's going on there. But right now, kind of main idea is still just trying to figure out what's going on the Mosquito Fire. Oh, it looks like they got some overnight infrared camera. So let's look at this. So I'd imagine that's the... don't know exactly what we're looking at right here. Maybe they explain it. Video captures Forest Hill Road. Fire is mapped at 61,000 acres. So it looks like this is the spot fire from yesterday. Now, it's not too helpful because we can't really see where any structures are on that, but that most likely means that this data that we got this morning that we've been looking at for that spot fire was from most likely that flight right there that picked up the data. And if you're new to the live stream, key thing that we figured out there was that it, as of right now, doesn't look like it's jumped north of Forest Hill Road, and Forest Hill High School is still good. And then a lot of these structures that we see in Forest Hill are still good as well. That's probably something I should come back to repeatedly because that's kind of the most important information of the day. Now, this one's 7 a.m. This will just give us a perfect summary of the morning briefing. Again, if you want to check that out, I put the link in the description. You can watch their morning briefing, but we're kind of compiling a lot of the same information here, but always good to go to the pros and get the real local information. But from the operational briefing, here's the summary of it. Head of the fire on the east side burned actively all night long. We can confirm that by looking at natural color fire, and this will be able to show us how active that fire was overnight. So yeah, that red glow right there. And we can actually make it a little bit longer so that we get more of those overnight hours. It is interesting that we see all this glow overnight, especially on that eastern side, because we did have some great improvements in relative humidity. What that means is we had a lot of moisture move in overnight, as high as I think 70% in some cases, and it does look like that actually calmed down the spot fire a bit on this left side, although you do still see that red glow there. And then we were actually looking at the camera of the spot fire earlier this morning, and we still had some smoke coming off of it, so certainly still some activity there that we're going to have to worry about today, but most of that activity overnight clearly on that eastern side. And that's a little bit worrisome because then as we get into this afternoon, there's already a lot of fire on the ground, and then that's going to basically just have a bigger baseline for this fire to start kind of taking off again once we get to the warmer and drier parts of the day. Although in a second we'll look at the weather forecast to just see how warm and dry we're going to get. Do just want to continue to watch this, or look at this, the operational briefing from this morning. Should have great ventilation in the afternoon once again. So although they say great ventilation on a fire is a very bad thing. That's actually the factor that led to most of the growth that we had yesterday. As I mentioned in previous days, we had a lot of cloud cover, and smoke cover, which was reducing our ventilation and was kind of keeping this fire nice and calm for us. But then yesterday, skies totally cleared, what you'd call great ventilation, and then the fire basically just gets a lot more oxygen to it. It brings in some windier conditions, and then also allows your temperatures to increase more because you're getting that sunlight coming in. And then that fire just basically increased in activity. It wasn't the most active day that we have seen on this fire, but it definitely was more active than previous days. So should have great ventilation in the afternoon once again. Winds on ridge tops could gust as high as 15 to 20 miles per hour. So the reason that's a concern is because where you see the activity on this fire right now shown in those red colors around that spot fire, and then especially on that eastern side, the winds are most likely going to be blowing from the southwest. Sometimes you can get kind of more complex winds going on because when you look at the topography in this area. There's all kinds of different canyons in here. For example, yesterday, not exactly southwest winds, but I'd imagine we had winds blowing up this little canyon right here that really spread that spot fire. So southwest is kind of the overlying flow over this fire, but then it's always a lot more complex in nature because there's very complex topography in this area, and that's most likely what led to that spot fire reaching up to Forest Hill Road but not going past Forest Hill Road yesterday. Then one other thing that I think about when I hear kind of windier conditions throughout the day today is all our containment lines. So the concern with windier conditions is that where we have like a lot of completed dozer line, the concern would be that the fire would be able to take a burning ember, drop it over that dozer line, lead to a new spot fire, and then just basically take off like we saw in the Dixie fire, where they had a great firing operation like this, and then we had a burning ember jump over it, and then it took off 15 miles in one day. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to be taking off 15 miles in one day on this fire, because as of right now, the information we've been able to find, it doesn't look like it's going to be that hot or dry this afternoon. And we'll be able to confirm that when we look at the weather forecast. Finally, let's try to finish this operational briefing. I'm quite the king of tangents throughout these videos, but again, we're just trying to compile all the different information on the Mosquito Fire to kind of just figure out what's going on right now, and then we'll look at the wildfire forecast to see what we can expect throughout the day today, because you can't forecast what's going to happen today until you know what happened in the past. So then they say the east side is going to want to keep chunking. The fire doesn't need a lot of wind to blow up. Division Juliet is between American and Fire Scars. Group torching expected again today. So that's the summary on the operational briefing. East side is going to keep chunking. So two things that I think about with that is when we look at this map right here, I'll orient it towards north. Let's look at it. When I turn on and off that growth we had yesterday, clearly keep an eye on that on the spot fire near Forest Hill, but then also look at that east side. Most of the growth yesterday was on the eastern side of this fire, and they expect that to keep growing, I would say, for most likely two reasons. One reason, actually three reasons. One, we can come and kind of zoom into a random part of this fire. You can see how steep a lot of this terrain is in here. And then what happens with fire is if you get a little spot fire, it looks like we have one, like this is a good example, that little red dot right there. Get a little spot fire right there. You get the southwesterly winds that pick up a burning ember, toss it outside the major blaze, drops it into this canyon. Then you have all this steep terrain, and what that spot fire is going to try to do is rush uphill. The reason fires like to go uphill is because as that little fire is right there, its smoke is going to be going up this hill, especially in the afternoon hours when you get those up canyon winds. So as the smoke is going up it, you're also getting the radiation from that little spot fire pushing up the hill as well. What that does is it preheats some of these fuels directly above that little spot and basically just makes those fuels ready to burn by the time the fire gets there. They've already lost some of their moisture, the radiation from the fire is drying them out, and then by the time that spot reaches those fuels, it blows up. Then it happens again, and it just basically rushes up the hill. So one reason they're expecting growth on that eastern side is all that steep topography. Another reason is if we look at fire history, absolutely nothing in here recently, which means there's a lot of fuels in this area that haven't burned in a really long time. And then with the California drought, the fuels in this area that haven't burned for a very long time are also very dry. Now, the other thing that's going on here is if we click into this afternoon, so this will be the first time that we've checked out the winds today. Let's look at the wind gusts. Does look like it's that same old southwesterly flow that we've seen over the last 5 days of this fire. So with those winds pushing from the southwest towards the northeast, that's going to try to just take where we have activity on this fire and push it towards the northeast. Now, one thing that we haven't done is we can actually look at GOES detections, and yeah, not actually picking up too much heat on this fire right now. A lot of times I don't show GOES detections because it overestimates how much fire is actually on the ground, because it sometimes picks up the heat that's in the smoke plume. But yeah, right now, not looking too bad, and we can actually kind of confirm that if we look at the smoke coming off of this fire right now. We definitely have some, and I'd say more than we'd like to see at 10:30 in the morning. Yeah, overall, I'd say, based on the fact that we're seeing more smoke than yesterday morning, and then we're going to have a lot of the same conditions yesterday, like those clear skies allowing for ventilation, and then some gusty winds, about 15 to 20 miles per hour. Right off the bat, I would say we're expecting... I can't make this prediction until I look at the temperatures and the winds. So temperature-wise, pretty cool throughout the day today. Just in the maybe high 60s to low 70s. Humidity, actually pretty great humidity. A few times on this fire, we've seen humidity dropping down into the low teens and the single digits during the afternoon hours. So temperature and humidity actually looking pretty good. It's kind of the winds and how dry the fuels are and how much fuels we have and the topography that I think are the big part of why we're going to see activity throughout the day today. Now, interested to see what our conditions are actually like on the ground right now. So let's click into Forest Hill. I'd say that's still the area that I'm the most concerned about today. And let's figure out what our conditions are like actually on the ground in Forest Hill. So this isn't weather model data or anything. This is going to be actual weather data from a little weather station in Forest Hill. 63 degrees. That's not too bad, and we're not really expecting to get that much warmer today. Relative humidity is at 54%, so that's great. That's why we did see that spot fire kind of calm down overnight. And then wind speeds, that's where there is the concern. Looks like we already have some gusts to 13 miles per hour. And usually your windiest times of the day will be about 2 to 4 o'clock, where the ground's heated up and then you get a lot of those winds rushing through canyons. So temperature and humidity overall not looking bad today, but I think winds, fuel, and topography will be the main thing that leads to activity on this fire. Now, something else we can do, yeah, we haven't looked at this yet, so we can check out the smoke forecast for today. Looks like it's mostly going towards the north throughout the day today, which tells us those winds are most likely towards the north, and that was what we just confirmed looking at the weather the weather model as well. Then when it comes to the air quality forecast, looks like everywhere to the north where that smoke is going to be blowing has that very hazardous or very unhealthy air quality in there. Now something, I think we've compiled enough information about what's been going on in the Mosquito Fire and then kind of the forecast. So now we can actually look at actually before I show this, I'll just give my prediction. I think based on all the information that we've had so far, does look like this spot fire here is going to burn throughout the day, but we do have some completed dozer lines around that section. So I'd imagine we will see it push into that dozer line throughout the day today, but I mean, I might just be saying this because I'm an optimist, but I think it's going to hold where we have all these other completed dozer lines, and I don't think that it's going to push into Forest Hill. Again, that might just be because I'm hoping for the best on this thing, but as of right now, the fact that they were able to stop this yesterday when it had all the momentum pushing up this hill, and they were able to stop it before it got to Forest Hill High School, pretty amazing right there. That was due to some of those completed dozer lines that they had prepared for because they kind of saw this kind of thing coming. And now you can imagine kind of one good thing about this spot fire is now a lot of these fuels have been cleared out, so it's not an area that's likely to be as active throughout the day today. Now what we can do, or we'll check out this again. So most of our activity, so I am expecting a little growth on that side, but not as much as what we had yesterday, just because it seems like they have a lot of completed dozer lines that'll hopefully keep that thing in check. Now the big disclaimer that I will put on that is it does sound like we have some windier conditions today, 15 to 20 mile per hour gusts, and the weather model is saying even gustier conditions than that. So the big concern there is that one of the burning embers kind of does something like what happened yesterday, where it's able to jump over what was considered kind of a good line, and then it's able to take off from there. So I think the main thing that I'll be watching today is for any more spot fires in this area, because even if you have a completed dozer line, if a little spot goes over that dozer line, then it can just take off once again, like what we saw yesterday. Now when it comes to the eastern side of that fire, that's the side of the fire where I'm actually expecting the most growth throughout the day today. That's the side of the fire that remained the most active overnight, and then that's also where we're seeing the most activity right now. The good news is it does look like they did an amazing firing operation up here, so hopefully that just blocks in this northern section and kind of catches it before it takes off farther north right there. But down in here, this is where I'm expecting the most growth today, because that's where we have the least amount of fire history, although it doesn't really even look like the 2013 American fire has been helping us very much. What we were hoping was that when the Mosquito Fire bumped into the 2013 American fire, that it would stop it in its tracks. And that is something you sometimes see on these fires, where it almost fits together like a puzzle piece, because a previous fire just took out a lot of the fuels. But this one looks like it's just rushing right through there, which tells me 2013 was long enough ago that enough fuels have grown back that we're able to just burn right through what we were hoping was a decent burn scar. But down here, that's where we have absolutely no fire history, so that's where I'm expecting the most growth today. So most growth expected eastern and northeastern side. Main reason for that, our winds are going to be from the southwest, which will basically just try to push that fire towards the northeast. Now we can do something that we haven't done in any of these videos. We can actually look at the Wharf S-Fire wildfire simulation model. This is a model that we run out of San Jose State, and it's one of the best models in the world. It basically takes in every factor you could think of when it comes to wildfire: fuel, weather, topography. And then what kind of sets this model apart from a lot of the other ones is it's able to actually figure out how the wildfire is going to create its own weather. So when you get a lot of growth, you'll get a lot of vertical movement of your air. So then you get air rushing in, and then that kind of influences the fire. And this model is able to take all that into account. Now, the one thing that this model doesn't take into account yet, or two things: I believe it doesn't take into account spot fires. So that's something that we're actually trying to add into the model right now at San Jose State. And then it also doesn't take into account wildfire operations. So if there's completed dozer line, it's not going to know that. So sometimes this model can overestimate the amount of growth, but it is a pretty good simulation for what it would look like if there were no completed dozer lines. So with all that being said, let's just check it out and see where Wharf S-Fire is saying there's going to be growth throughout the day today. Looks like right off the bat, we're seeing a lot of that growth on the northern side right there. And then also seeing some chunking along on the eastern side. But also look at what these wind arrows are doing. Notice in the afternoon hours, this is 2:15 this afternoon. You have those southwesterly winds, and that pushes the fire towards the northeast. Now, this is where I'd be getting in overnight. So something I always like to do is zoom out. We'll look at the fire, and then we'll just kind of fast forward it. And that shows where the model is predicting growth over the next 2 days. So the good news is it's not predicting all that much growth on the western side. I think that might be a little bit optimistic. I'd imagine we do get some more acreage burned on this western side throughout the day today. But then on this northern side, I would say that's also where it's overestimating it. Because if if we click in here, that's where we have that firing operation right there. And then I believe we have completed dozer line that goes up even farther than that. So that should be able to stop the fire before it jumps over. But you can see why CAL FIRE and all the other agencies working on this have been putting in so much work on this northern edge, is because what they want to do is stop it by the time it gets in there. Because if it jumps over there, then there's a lot more room for that fire to keep growing. So I think that's going to be Forest Hill, I'd say, is the top place that I'm watching throughout the day today, because that's the part of the fire that's closest towards the largest amount of structures. Just to prove that, we could turn on structures here, and you can see most of those orange dots on the western side of the fire. But I'm also going to be watching this northern section closely to see if all that firing operation and those completed dozer lines in there can actually hold. Now, I know I've said a lot of kind of concerning and bad news on this one, so let's just look at one area of very good news. Down in this section, that was one of the spots that we were the most concerned about a few days ago. Big reason we were that concerned was you see all of these structures in here, and the fire was pushing right up against those structures. And at one point, that was where we had a lot of activity on this fire. Now, if we look at the containment map, you now see that that's an area of the fire that is considered pretty much fully contained, where you see that black line in there. So we're looking great when it comes to that section of the fire. So that, I would say, is some very good news right there. So if you're just joining, I'll try to do a quick summary on the Mosquito Fire. I know we've covered a lot of information already, but if you're just joining, I'll try to sum it all up in about 3 minutes, and then we'll maybe check out what's going on the Dutch Flat Fire and the Cedar Creek Fire. Looking over at the live chat, I noticed some people have mentioned the Dutch Flat Fire. Apologies for not keeping up with the live chat as well as I should. I always find it hard to read and talk and look at maps at the same time. Hopefully that's something I'll improve on in future videos, because that is kind of the point of these Wildfire Insider videos, is it's us all kind of working together to figure out what's going on in wildfire in California together, because your guys' questions and comments a lot of times point me in the right direction. So I do see that somebody just said 64 buildings destroyed in Mosquito. I'm hoping half of those are just outbuildings. So 64 buildings. I did remember seeing something about structures destroyed. I wonder if I'd read that on the NC web page. So not seeing anything right here, but this is actually, we'll come back to this. It does look like we have over 3,000 personnel in this fire, so that's pretty good to see right there. All right, so the quick summary of the Mosquito Fire. So it looks like it's up to 61,012 acres. Looks like it's 20% contained. If we want to see where that growth was yesterday, we can zoom out, look at the most recent data that we have on the Mosquito Fire. Let's orient towards north so we're not too confused in here. And wow, Google Earth. All right, I shouldn't complain. Google Earth's amazing. So turning on and off our fire data from yesterday. There's probably 3 things that you notice here. One is that spot fire around Forest Hill. That was the top story yesterday. 2 is probably the fact that most of our growth was towards the east. And then 3 is that big firing operation that we have up towards the north. So we can kind of just look at each of those one at a time. Yesterday, on this section of the fire, let's turn off our recent data. This is what it looked like. There's the Middle Fork American River. Here's Forest Hill up on top of the hill. And basically some eddies in this little canyon right here. We're able to pick up a burning ember, toss it over the American River, and then due to those afternoon winds that rush up canyon and then a lot of these fuels that haven't burned in a really long time, it quickly grew up this canyon. If we actually want to see what it looked like, we can go back over to my Twitter, where I did post a video of that spot fire yesterday. So this is the spot fire yesterday. Clicking back in towards the beginning, you notice how there's just a little bit of smoke at the beginning, and then how quickly it just turns into an active spot fire, and then it quickly grew to a few hundred acres throughout the day. So I posted that 18 hours ago, and then it just continued to grow through the overnight, or not the overnight hours as much. It seemed like it calmed down a little overnight, but we definitely did see a large amount of growth on it yesterday. So burning ember jumps the Middle Fork American River, rushes up towards Forest Hill, and then that is what that spot fire ended up doing. So clicking that on and off, I was actually a little too zoomed in right there. You can see all that growth that we had yesterday. Now here's actually where some of the good news comes in, is they had completed a large amount of dozer lines in this area, because this is an area of the fire where we have the largest amount of structures shown with those orange dots right there. If you want to see them, I could click them on and off. This is an area of the fire where we have the largest amount of structures. So they've been putting in tons of dozer lines, which you can see with those black X's in there. Hopefully you have really good eyes. I can't zoom in anymore on that map. And because of all of that work that they'd previously put in, they were amazingly able to stop this before it rushed into Forest Hill High School, and then also into where we see hundreds of structures in Forest Hill itself. Now, as of right now, I haven't seen any reports of spot fires going north of Forest Hill Road, so that is some great news right there. Hopefully that great news continues throughout the day today, although we do have some gusty winds and clear conditions expected again today. So we're going to have to keep a very close eye on that. Now we're also going to be watching this eastern section of the fire, because that is where the most growth was yesterday. That's where we saw the most growth last night and into this morning, where you see a lot of that smoke coming off of the fire right now. So we're already starting with a lot of activity on that side of the fire. You can also see that activity if we look at this map. Clearly, eastern and northeastern side of the fire active. Let's see if we already have, we already have those southwesterly winds. That right there, if you see one map today, this explains where we're going to see the largest amount of fire growth today. It's towards the northeastern and eastern side of this fire, because those winds are just going to act to push that fire forward. Now, while winds are a concern and lack of fire history in this area is a concern, we do have a couple of factors working in our favor when it comes to temperature. Just getting into the high 60s to maybe low 70s throughout the day today. So huge improvement from those triple digit temperatures that we had not long ago when we had the most activity on this fire. Now, when we had those triple digit temperatures, when we were in the peak of that heat wave, we also had very low relative humidity in the low teens to even single digits at some times. And if we look at the humidity expected today, probably around 30 to 40%. So that's good news right there as well. The big concern again is lack of fire history, how much fuel we have in this area, and the southwesterly winds, and the fact that all that moisture that was helping us the last few days has officially moved off to Nevada, and now those clear skies, just like yesterday, are going to allow for more activity in the afternoon hours. Now, one thing that we haven't looked at yet that I was just reminded of as I was talking is when it comes to those cool temperatures, I want to see how long they're going to be sticking around, because that's probably a big reason that even though we had a lot of activity yesterday, it wasn't ridiculous growth. We didn't burn 10,000 acres in a day or anything like that. And it was most likely because we were helped out by the cooler temperatures and the increased relative humidity. And if we look at the overall forecast for California today, I'll explain this map. So this is temperature anomaly, which means how far are you off from your average conditions. Now remember, in the heat wave, when the mosquito fire was just taking off, this was about, the entire map of California was dark red because we were 20 to, in some cases, even 30 degrees above average. Now if we look at it, much better picture for California. Almost all of California, that blue color, which represents below average temperatures. So basically, if we're supposed to be 80 degrees over the Mosquito Fire, we're actually just expected to be about 70 degrees today. It looks like we're about 10 degrees below average. Let's see if this luck is going to continue. Looks like tomorrow, still blue. Love to see that. On Friday, still blue. And then, wow, Saturday looks like we get even colder. So that's some great news there. Looking at the CPC outlook. So next 5 days, we're looking cooler than expected. Then if we look 6 to 10 days out, we're looking cooler than expected. So that is some great news right there when it comes to temperatures. And usually when you get lower temperatures, you get the higher humidity. But with all that being said, there's enough fuel in this area and there's enough winds this afternoon that we are going to see some of that growth towards the northeast. Now, one thing that we haven't done yet that I do want to point out is a lot of people have been asking about Tahoe. So let's actually just see how close this is to Tahoe. I want to see where a lot of those structures start around Tahoe. So it looks like most of the structures around Tahoe, not surprisingly, are right along the lake right here. Now we can take our little measuring tool and let's go to the closest part of the fire, to the closest structures we see around the lake. That looks to be about 25 miles. If we go to where we're expecting the most active part of the fire, to the largest amount of structures, that's going to be about maybe 26 miles. So we still have a lot of distance between the Mosquito Fire and Lake Tahoe. I'd say it's something that I'm watching, but it's not exactly something I'm overly concerned about as of right now. So I'd say that's the basic summary on people who are wondering about Lake Tahoe. Definitely watching it because those southwesterly winds have been leading to a lot of activity on this eastern side. But given the fact that our temperatures over the next 10 days are below average, that means we'll have a decent amount of humidity as well. And those kind of conditions really diminish the probability where you get one of those days that takes off 15 miles in one day like we saw in the Dixie Fire last year. So, not expecting one of those extreme days that could rush it all the way to Lake Tahoe as of right now, but I am still expecting activity on this eastern and northeastern section of the fire. So, I think that we pretty much covered the Mosquito Fire right there enough. Again, later tonight, when we actually start to see how this is doing over the afternoon, I'll do another one of those kind of 10 to 20 minute videos. I've been going long recently because there's been so much to talk about. And then I also do a 2-minute, very concise update because I know you probably don't have time to go back and watch this, 30-minute to an hour video. So if you want much more quick updates on the Mosquito Fire, I post those to my channel. But now let's actually switch things up and let's figure out what else is going on in the world of wildfire in California, because it's not just the Mosquito Fire. I know we have a couple of other ones to talk about. This is always just a great place to start. Looks like Fairview Fire, 28,000 acres, 69% contained. I don't think we really even need to look at that one. I haven't seen any activity on that anytime recently. Mountain Fire, that's at 13,000, 70% contained, so containment still increasing there. Now, Dutch Fire, I would say would be worth looking at because this is something that popped up yesterday. I saw a lot of people talking about it, and I haven't looked at it yet. Oh, right there. That's some good news for the Dutch Fire. So, grew to 48 acres. You notice how close it is to the Mosquito Fire. So, already bumped up to 50% contained. All evacuations have been lifted. Interstate 80 open to one lane in both directions. So, yeah, I don't even think we're showing the Dutch Fire on this map. So, all right. I was expecting us to have to look at the Dutch Fire for a lot longer today, but I think that pretty much sums it up. It grew 48 acres yesterday. All evacuations have been lifted, so we're looking pretty good right there. Now, I'm interested to see, I'm going to take our InSiWeb and see what's going on the Cedar Creek Fire, because that was something that we were looking at yesterday up here in Oregon. Looks like we have some smoke settling down over the Cedar Creek fire right now, which means there's some smoke there tomorrow. Actually, I can't tell if that's fog. It might be fog just based on how fast that burns off. You would expect that to be fog if it burns off that quickly. But if we want to actually try to see the Cedar Creek fire, let's turn off structures because that's going to get a bit overwhelming if we keep those on. Coming up to Oregon, Cedar Creek. So it looks like a lot less activity on Cedar Creek than especially in previous days. Still a couple red dots on the southern side. Can't really tell if that's the fire itself or if that's just some maybe firing operations that they're still doing. But if we look at ghost detections, nothing on the Cedar Creek. So that's pretty good news right there. I do just want to give you guys the most recent numbers for that one. Looks like it's up to 92,595 acres. And not seeing a containment number. Yeah, not seeing a containment number. Still have 1,800 personnel on this, but due to the lack of activity on the Cedar Creek fire, I'd say that's not exactly one I'm too worried about at this point anymore. So kind of the main thing that I'm going to be watching today will be the Mosquito Fire. Again, that's up to over 61,000 acres, 20% contained. Still some evacuation orders and warnings in place. When it comes to the Mosquito Fire, the top area that I'm going to be watching today is going to be that area around Forest Hill to see if a lot of those dozer lines that we've completed in that area are able to hold. Oh, so I see somebody just says, how about the mountain fire? All right, let's check out the mountain fire. Let's go in here. So that's up towards the north. Let's view some details on this one. So this is 13,000 acres, 70% contained. Let's zoom down. Looks like there are some links to evacuation information, so it's always good to look at. 4 structures destroyed, 2 injuries. Resources, we still have over 1,500 personnel on this one. And now let's see if we have some activity on the mountain fire. So, right in here. So it looks like those yellow dots, that represents where the more recent growth was, but you notice not very many yellow dots at all. And if we look at ghost detections, not really seeing any heat coming off of that. So overall, mountain fire, I would say, is looking pretty good right now. And that kind of explains why they've been able to increase it to about 70%. Now, one other thing we can just do is look at localized sectors. And yeah, this will show us both the Mosquito and Northern California. Yeah, not seeing any other smoke up in Northern California, so don't think we... Sorry, I just looked at the live chat. Somebody says, sounds like a rodeo cowboy name. I love it. I will take that compliment any day of the week. And, you know, family is from Montana. I think the name Holt does come from the side of my family that is from Montana. So, yeah, maybe there's a little rodeo cowboy in there, but I'm more of a surfer Californian, so don't know how cowboy I am. But, yeah, Northern California, not seeing a whole lot of smoke here. So that's good around the mountain fire, where we do have that smoke clearly on the Mosquito Fire. Finally, last thing maybe we'll look at, I'm going to refresh this and see how active it's looked in the last 3 hours to see if it already looks like it's picking up. So I believe this camera right here shows the eastern side of the fire. Yesterday we had a lot of activity on this eastern side, and it does look like it remained active overnight. My main concern for the day is that with those clear skies and those gusty winds, that we're going to see this eastern side of the fire become really active. So is the fire burning slower on the Placerville side? So what we can do here is we can look at, I could click this on and off to show where the largest amount of growth has been recently. And then for anybody who doesn't know, we can show exactly where Placerville is. So that's going to be the southern edge of the fire that we're talking about. Placerville down there. We'll have to zoom out to do this. if you look at the fire, most of the growth recently has been on the northern and eastern side of the fire. We did get that spot fire yesterday around Forest Hill, but this whole southern section of the fire has seen no growth in, so I'm turning off days here, no growth in maybe even 5 or 6 days. So since maybe my data from September 10th, we had some growth towards the south there. So since then, almost nothing on that southern side. And when we look at the, I think it's this one, the containment map, that's where we have a lot of containment on the southern side, expecting even more down here as we move forward. So I would say Placerville side looking pretty good. The area where I expect the most growth throughout the day today is going to be on that eastern and northeastern side. I'll just say that again one more time. We got another comment. So this is why I kind of like these Wildfire Insider videos. This is me just kind of trying to figure out the state of wildfire in California, and I don't always know what the most important thing to look at or talk about is, so it is helpful when you guys throw in comments or questions. So we have one, how's the containment on the Fairview Fire? So I didn't look at that, so let's check out the Fairview Fire. That is 28,307 acres, 69% contained. Let's actually go down there, see if there's any activity on it. Because the last I looked, since Hurricane K moved in and brought in all that great moisture that we had, I haven't really seen any activity on the Fairview Fire recently. So here we are, Fairview Fire, and Modus and Veers is turned on. But you notice you don't see any of those yellow stars around the Fairview Fire, which means not seeing any heat activity there. If we want to prove it, turn on ghost detections, nothing. So that's some good news for the Fairview Fire. Looks like we are going to take that 69% containment and just continue to increase that. And then I also just noticed somebody said smoke in Reno is in the hazardous level. And air quality is often the thing that impacts the largest amount of people. So we can look at the air quality right now. Yeah. So just clicking in here, you can see that it's due to the Mosquito Fire, and then it's also due to those winds pushing the smoke. You can tell the direction that the winds are blowing because that's the direction the smoke is blowing. And then if we look at that air quality map, what happens a lot is overnight, your winds die down, and then the smoke is able to settle down into the surface. So a lot of times when wildfires are at their most active, which is in the afternoon, a lot of that smoke is just being pushed way up into the air. Like you see right here during yesterday afternoon when that spot fire was going crazy around Forest Hill. A lot of that smoke is going straight up in the air. And some of those winds are actually leading to some, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's good air quality by any standards, but at least not terrible. But then what happens overnight, if we come back over here, it should sort of show it right here. So what happens overnight is your winds die down, and then all that smoke just settles down to the surface. So then you're breathing in all that really poor air quality. So right now it looks like some very unhealthy to hazardous air around the Mosquito Fire. That is going to be something that I continue to look at. Overall though, when somebody says, do you have access to what type of hazardous particles are in the smoke from these fires? I don't have access to that, but one good thing I will say about some of the smoke is it seems like a lot of our growth on the Mosquito Fire recently has just been in where we just have fuels, especially on that eastern side. It's the eastern side that's producing the largest amount of smoke right now. And if we look at kind of what's on this eastern side, it's really just a lot of fuel. So that's good news for a few reasons. One, it's going to clear out some of that fuel so future wildfires aren't as dangerous. Two, it's not burning a bunch of structures, and that's the last thing that you want on a wildfire. And then three, it's when you burn structures, that's where you imagine all of the chemicals that are in structures and everything that you have in a house. That's where you can get some very hazardous air quality with very bad chemicals in it. So it's actually kind of a good thing that we're mostly just burning fuel at this point as opposed to structures, but obviously that's important for a lot of other reasons. So how do we see the perimeter dozer lines on the mapping you're using? So to figure that out, you go to, actually, I'll show you where you can find it. So you go to InSeeWeb. I put the link for that in the description of this video. And then you click on Maps right here. And then what that's going to do is bring you to all sorts of maps, but you can click the one that looks like this. Where you see the red line, that's where the fire is uncontained. Where you see the black line, that's where we have containment. And then down on the bottom here, they give you a legend. And the one that we're looking at for dozer lines is that one right there. So completed dozer line are those black X's. And then if we zoom up, you can see where there are black X's around this fire. So hopefully keeping that spot fire in check throughout the day today. Then we have another backup dozer line just in case some of those winds that we're expecting this afternoon have it jump that dozer line. We've got another one right there. And then amazing all the work that they've been doing on this northern side of the fire with that firing operation yesterday and then that dozer line that stretches all the way up to Westville. Going to be very interesting to see if that holds the fire in place over the next couple of days. But with that being said, I am going to try to save my voice for the updates and forecasts that I'll be doing tonight. If you want to see those, you can subscribe to Holt Hanley Wildfire Forecasting on YouTube. And then throughout the day, if I'll be working at KSBW tonight, so I won't have time to do any updates until about 7 o'clock. But I will have time to do some quick updates on Twitter like I was doing yesterday and throughout much of this wildfire season. So you can also follow Holt Hanley Wildfire Forecasting on Twitter to continue to get those updates until about 7. And then I plan on doing a 10 to 20 minute video on the Mosquito Fire tonight and the activity we've seen throughout the day. And then I'll also do a 2-minute concise video just for anybody who doesn't have time to watch a 20-minute video about wildfire. So I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you all again tomorrow morning for Wildfire Insider, and then also tonight for the updates on the Mosquito Fire, and then also the forecast for where we can expect that Mosquito Fire to go in the future. So, hope you all have a good day.